She's got some nice long hair.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching out there on YouTube. Also, if you're listening to the show anywhere that you get your podcast, make sure to rate 5 stars. We continue to donate money, 20% of what we make, over to the Thorn organization, which helps fight against human trafficking. So thank you guys so much for listening. And also, I will donate an additional $1 for every 5-star rating we get out there on Apple Podcast. So even if you just listen to the show on YouTube, just go over there, rate 5 stars. You are doing something good. But guys, we got a awesome show for you today. We have Steph from the 49K podcast. She covers all things 49ers, and we had to have her on the show to just give a 49ers opinion on this game. Steph, how you doing?
Doing pretty well. Excited for this game. Can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, we just got off of an episode on her show, so we already know what each other's thinking right now.
We're trying to be neutral as much as possible, right? We're trying to be objective, but always on the side of our team, ultimately.
Yeah, so I gotta ask you this question just up front. Like, with your show being connected to the 49ers fans, how do people take this game? Are they kind of thinking this is like all right, we're on to week 2 already? Or because we know what the national media thinks of the Bears. So we know that it's kind of negative. Is that kind of the feeling with the 49ers faithful? Or is it like, hey, this could be a sneaky game?
I'm not going to lie to you. I think the 49er fans are also, definitely thinking that this is going to be a cakewalk for them ultimately. And it's not so much, because of the Bears offense. I think a little bit of that, right? Because everyone knows about the offensive line, the Bears offensive. That's like the low hanging fruit, right? And so everyone assumes that it's going to be terrible. And we have the 49ers defensive line, who we know is, we think is ready to take the next step. We think it's going to be a top 3 defense, maybe top in the league. So yeah, I think in that regard, we obviously think that we're favored. But I know on my channel, I've done both an offensive and defensive preview of this game, even before like the preview we just did.
Yep.
And, I always try to be, neutral and objective, because anything can happen on any given Sunday. And you just never know, especially in week 1. There's so much allure and curiosity, so many things you don't know, because a lot can change from, last season. I know the Bears and 49ers played in week 8 last season, and we know how that went, but it could be a completely different ball game. A lot has changed since then. So yeah, you can never really take what happened last year and put too much stock into that, right?
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of just last year, I know I said this on your show, but I want to say this also here, just because it means this much to the Bears fans. Thank you, 49ers, for beating the Packers every freaking year. Like I was telling you on your show, just us Bears fans, we're all a little bit of a 49ers fan, just in that sense that we always know you guys are going to beat the Packers. So thank you. And if the Packers are going to make the playoffs and we aren't, we hope that you guys are there just to kick them off so they can't win and go to the Super Bowl.
It's a tradition as old as time, just death, taxes, and beating Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs. That's just what happens.
I love it. But so let's get into this. Let's talk about a little bit about the injury report. So just because it's another day that's gone by, from the Bears' perspective, doesn't look like Velus Jones Jr. is going to be playing. And also we have Dominique Robinson is questionable, as we know, kind of the backup defensive end for the Bears. But also Lucas Patrick, we just have to see where exactly he might play. He might be starting, he might not be. There doesn't seem to be a lot of info out there, but some insiders such as Brad Biggs says that he doesn't really think that he's going to be out there, but if anything, he might be right guard. My opinion, keep Sam Mustipher at center and then have Tevin Jenkins be that right guard. Trust the healthy person. But speaking of health and going over to the 49ers, George Kittle, third day in a row not practicing, right now is listed as questionable. I was thinking doubtful. Steph, what are you feeling? Are you feeling like he's actually going to play come Sunday or not so much?
I was actually surprised by the questionable designation as well, because he hasn't practiced at all this week. So that would lead you to believe that he's doubtful and most likely not playing in this game. I mean, he said he feels significantly better, but at the end of the day, like, that doesn't really matter too much. If the player wants to play, ultimately it's the coach's decision at the end of the day, or the doctor's, right? So I feel like the 49ers are gonna lean to the side of caution and probably keep him out for this week 1 game. Definitely don't want to risk, worsening his injury at all. It's week 1. It's the start of the season. It's a long season ahead of you. You don't want to start it on the wrong foot and, potentially worsen things that don't need to be worsened, right? So, I think the talk of optimism. I know even Kyle Shanahan said he hopes that Kittle will be out there. To me, that's just all coach speak, and we're now getting into real regular season, right? Where like coaches say things just to like kind of mess with the other team. And yeah, the Bears have to, because he's questionable, they have to still prepare as if George Kittle might be out there. But ultimately, I think it's going to be the second tight end, Charlie Warner, who probably gets the start. And I think we see a little bit of maybe Ross Dwelley and Tyler Kroft mixed in there as well.
Okay. And yeah, that's good news for us Bears fans. Hopefully Warner's out there. And I see right now, I don't know much about Warner. 12th, he's rated 12th according to PFF at the tight end position. Is he really that good? Or tell me a little bit more about Warner.
He's not bad, but he's also not George Kittle. Like, and I think that's what it all comes down to, right? Like, he's definitely good enough to be Kittle's backup, but that's about it. And so I know the 49ers like him as a tight end too. I personally would have liked the 49ers to have addressed the backup tight end position, a little more aggressively this offseason. They brought in Tyler Kroft, who brings, veteran presence, and, he's jumped around here and there in this league, and he definitely has some experience. He hasn't been terrible in his career. So he's someone who, I wouldn't hate if they mixed him in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the point is it's not George Kittle who's out there. And interesting enough, Warner did start against the Bears in week 8 last season because Kittle was out for that game as well. Warner was targeted twice, and he only had 1 7-yard reception. So this is just what I'm saying. Like, from the defensive standpoint for the Bears, right? Like, you're not going to feel half as threatened, with Charlie Warner as you are with George Kittle, in any part of the field, really. And not to mention the fact that, the run blocking, the pass blocking, takes a dip as well.
Yeah, awesome. And so with this too, the person throwing him the football, the biggest question, I think, for all of us Bears fans, and honestly, I think it's also the thumbnail that I created for this episode. But before we get into too much depth with Trey Lance, we were talking a little bit of draft on your show. So with the NFL draft, who did you think and want the 49ers to get with that pick number 3? Was it Trey Lance or was it Justin Fields?
Pretty early in the, off season, after they had traded for the number 3 pick, I know the talk was a lot about like it has to be Justin Fields, because you guys probably remember, like, there was the Justin Fields had attended the QB collective, who, the Shanahans had a large hand in that, and their entire offense, just teaching that to quarterbacks and things like that. So there was that connection. Then the fact that, Kyle Shanahan is over there smiling with Justin Fields at his pro day, they look happy. And no, like, I think a lot of us really thought that there was a real possibility that this was a no-brainer just because of the fact that there were some connections there already, right?
Yeah.
And we also thought that the Kyle Shanahan wanted something different at quarterback. You know what you had with Jimmy Garoppolo, and we felt pretty strongly actually that Kyle Shanahan would want something different. Mac Jones is Jimmy Garoppolo light, right? He
Yeah.
he might he might become a better version of Jimmy Garoppolo in his career, sure, but largely a lot of the same skill sets. And so like we felt like why would you move on from Jimmy Garoppolo to get another Jimmy Garoppolo,
Yeah.
in a sense. Um, so 49er fans never really bought the Mac Jones at 3 hype at all. And so it really came down to Justin Fields and Trey Lance in most of our eyes. Now, the thing with Trey Lance, that started heating up closer to the draft, right? So then I
Yeah.
think as the draft neared and really that day, I started leaning towards, okay, I think it's going to be Trey Lance because you started to kind of see all of the reports kind of start to lean that way. And yeah, I mean, that's what ended up happening for better or for worse, right? For the 49ers. I know it's still too early to say from our perspective whether that was the right move or not, but we'll certainly find out. I know you guys are very happy with being able to have gotten Justin Fields. So yeah, these two are going to be connected like their entire careers. You know what
Oh,
I mean?
completely. And
So
especially
yeah,
especially because like kind of like what you said too, they're also not Mac Jones. Like Mac Jones
yeah, they have that
was
going for them.
was the pudgy kid. Yeah, exactly. Like the pudgy kid, the like this is, Jimmy Garoppolo light, Kirk Cousins light, like just not good stereotypes that you want associated with yourself. Then you have the scrambling quarterbacks that can kind of make all the throws. Um, so let's get into this 49ers offense. So now that he has had that year, now that he's under this, all the lead, he's the lead guy now. Are your expectations of Trey Lance?
I expect this season to be very up and down for him. And what I saw from him at 49ers training camp is that he could be very volatile, right? Like there are some plays where he looks like he has all the tools. He's going to be a star. That was an amazing throw right there. Like Jimmy Garoppolo never makes that throw kind of thing. And then there are other plays where, kind of leaves you scratching your head a little bit. And you got to remember he's a rookie. You got to remember he was raw coming out. He didn't have a lot of snaps even in college. And so he's a little behind in that sense, right? And so you have to really, I think, be patient and accept that he's going to have to learn on the fly. And I think the 49ers knew that going into this situation. And that was part of the reason that they liked Trey Lance. He was very intelligent, not to say that any of the other quarterbacks weren't, but I know that, how Trey Lance tested out as far as like his intelligence was kind of off the charts. So I think they're kind of betting on him being a fast learner. But ultimately, I think this is going to be a very up and down season for him.
Yeah, and one thing with that too, with the up and down season, like, do you think that he's going to be taking advantage of his feet at all? Do you think that there's going to be some designed run similar to like the North Dakota State type of offense, or do you think Shanahan's going to try and make him like a true passer?
I think the great thing about Trey Lance is that he was already like more of a passer, right? Like he's not one of those quarterbacks that is going to, at the first sight of any pressure, going to look to run. And even more so, I feel like this year, watching him in training camp, that's something because he's going against the 49ers defense in practice, like every day in training camp, right? Like that's a hell of a test for him. And I felt like in the second week of camp, he really did a better job of being comfortable with taking what the defense gives you.
Yeah.
You know, taking the checkdowns if it's there. Sometimes he's always looking like down, like the first week, he was always looking downfield, trying to make a big play. And so he'd get caught up in that. And sometimes like it'd lead to either a bad play or, him getting sacked by the defensive line. Now in the second week, like I said, he was better at, just taking what the defense gives him. And, so I think that's going to be important for him. But ultimately, I feel like he has a lot of good discipline in the pocket, right? Like he's always looking to throw first. And if he does get flushed out of the pocket, he's still going to look to throw first. There was in the preseason, the first preseason game against the Packers, one of my favorite plays in that one was he got flushed out of the pocket. He set his feet and looked to throw, wasn't there, and then he scrambled. So like it's just one of those things that I feel like a lot of young mobile quarterbacks don't have right off the bat, right? Like sometimes you got to teach that out of them, that they want to just like tuck and run at the first sight of any pressure. But I feel like it's a good sign that he already has that maturity to kind of just hang in there as long as he can and try to get a play downfield before making a play with his legs.
If you had to guess how many rushes he would have by the end of the game, are you thinking 5 or are you thinking it might even be double digits?
I would probably say like definitely below 10. Like I'd hover like 5. Yeah. Like I honestly don't feel like Kyle Shanahan wants to have him running all that much, because I think he wants that to be kind of like a, something to keep in the arsenal, just when you really need it. But it's always nice to have that threat, but you also don't want the defense to expect it like on every other play, So ultimately I think it's, gonna try to keep him in the pocket as much as possible, which I know goes against what we saw in that, game against the Cardinals. Everyone thinks about that game, but I think that was more so because he just wasn't ready to handle the full, playbook at that time, maybe.
Now, one thing too, because you're talking about the wide receivers, I know Debo signed that new deal, and rumor, like, some of the rumors that have been going around is that he can't be a running back anymore, or like there's something in the language or something. Are you buying that at all? Or do you think there's going to be some running plays that might be happening with Debo?
So it turns out that all of that was just false. There was a lot of like talk about his contract and like the trade that he had requested. So that part was true, right? That he made a request, but certainly didn't think that it would get out like in the media and all of that. But I think his brother actually kind of, told everyone that he had requested a trade accidentally. But yeah, no, I don't think that the wide back, I don't think any of that has been worked into his contract to incentivize him not doing it. In fact, it incentivizes him to continue being a wide back, right? He gets a little more money if he reaches certain rushing stats this season. And so I really do feel like the 49ers are going to continue on with that. I don't think it's going to be quite as many carries in a game as he was handling like towards, the second half of last season, because at the end of the day, they do want to preserve his body as well. You don't want him taking that many hits. You just spent a bunch of money on him. You want to make sure he's healthy for the long haul, but they're going to also want to, they know that he's very dangerous as a wide back. And so I would think maybe 1 or 2 carries a game max.
And so just sticking with the wide receivers too, because you have Brandon Ayuk, you have Debo. What can you tell me about, what is it, Jawan Jennings? Because he seems to be slotted at your slot.
Yeah.
What's kind of going on with like the wide receivers not named Ayuk and Samuel?
Well, interesting enough, the 49ers actually brought in Ray McCloud as well this offseason, who, kind of figured to also be a slot receiver. And at some points in training camp, Jawan Jennings just kind of didn't seem like he was all the way there. suffered with the yips and the drops a little bit. And so I don't know if you can kind of argue that maybe Ray McLeod might have a bigger role, to start the season than Juwan Jennings. But that being said, Juwan Jennings towards the end of last season, played a really big role as a chain mover, really dependable kind of guy for the 49ers. And so if he can really do just that, I mean, I think he has a role on this team. Ray McLeod will have a role, I think, as well. I think they're going to change around who they put out there as their third receiver just based on the situation. And they also drafted Danny Gray out of SMU, speedster, a few connections with Trey Lance as well throughout camp, a lot of bombs. So, I think there's that potential. I don't know if we see that in week 1, but I think they're going to sprinkle it in here and there just to have that like threat of being able to take the top off the defense.
So with taking the top off the defense, how do you think that they're going to attack this Bears secondary? Because on your show, I was saying that I really like the safeties for the Bears. How do you think that they attack? Is it a lot of short game with Trey Lance, or are they going to try and take the top off of the defense and try and hit them big?
I think for the most part, I feel like the offense isn't going to look too different. Like, I feel like a lot of people automatically think going from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance means that suddenly you're going to be going deep all of the time. And, which, it's great to have a quarterback who's probably a little more accurate downfield, sure. But I think ultimately, like Kyle Shanahan, his offense largely is going to stay the same. And that is, running the football first, but also, taking those short intermediate passes as well. So I think that's kind of like the bread and butter of this offense. And when you think about Trey Lance and, we mentioned his inexperience, having those short, quick momentum plays is going to be really important for him, especially in this game. So I think the first priority is going to be running the football and, trying to get some passes going off of that. And then I think they're going to try to do, some easy dink and dunk kind of things. And, maybe here and there go with a deep, play action, kind of play. And Kyle Shanahan could definitely scheme some guys open. So I'm not too worried about that. So I think there's potential we see, a big play or two in this game.
Yeah. So going with the run too, you brought that up. So you're saying that it's probably going to be run heavy. How confident are you in this running game? It's going to be raining. It's going to be new grass on the field where if it's put in right, it could be fast. If it's put in wrong, it could be shredded up. How confident are you in this running attack for the 49ers?
I'm pretty confident because it's what they do, right? Like they always look to establish the run, and when that gets going, that's really when they're most dangerous, and they really start feeling themselves as a group, right? Like it really gets their momentum going. But not having George Kittle out there, who is a large part of the 49ers run success, right? And just being able to run block as well as he does. Not having that out there, could take some juice out of the run game a little bit. But overall, I still feel pretty confident in what, Elijah Mitchell brings, as well as Deebo Samuel. Even just having like one carry or two for Deebo Samuel, like we know how dangerous he could be out of the backfield. So I think that there's a potential for a big play there. But I feel pretty confident in also having Trey Lance now as a threat to run himself, right? I mean, that could potentially open things up for Elijah Mitchell and for Deebo and, other guys as well. So I feel pretty good about it. The only thing I would say is, one, not having Kittle, and also the offensive line. The offensive line throughout the preseason and even much of training camp just looked bad. I mean, I'll be honest with you. So That's kind of my concern. Now, there's been a large gap now between, training camp to now, right? Where they could have had some time to work things out. We were talking earlier about, how much continuity and like just chemistry is important in on the offensive line. So I'm really hoping that the time between camp and week one, really helps this 49ers offensive line start to gel, but it could take much longer than just week one.
Yeah, and when I was doing my preview as well, I was looking at that offensive line, and yeah, I was going into this going, this line is going to be crazy good, right? Because like that's just the expectation,
Yeah.
but it wasn't looking as good. So I was going to ask you, where is the weakness on this offense? So tell me a little bit more about this line because we know about Williams being elite, we know about McGlinchey, but what about this interior of this line?
Yeah, that's really where all the question marks lie, right? And that's really where all of the new pieces are. So that's kind of like that has been the concern with this offensive line. Jake Brendel had been competing with former right guard of last year, Daniel Brunskill, for the center position most of camp up until Daniel Brunskill got hurt. And then it pretty much was handed to Jake Brendel. I don't want to say handed because it was kind of leaning towards Jake Brendel anyway, but they were doing a lot of back and forth. Literally every practice, they were switching them off. And that's why I say like they kind of weren't doing the offensive line any favors throughout camp because they kept switching the center every day. So to the point of continuity, that's not a great way to get that going. But anyway, so Jake Brendel's the guy at center right now. It's really his first time being a starter at center. He's been in the league many years now, but largely unproven as a starter, right? The 49ers feel good about him. But we'll just have to see how he does, right? I'm more concerned about Aaron Banks a little bit. He's second year player that they drafted and didn't play at all last season, and I don't want to say getting thrown into the fire, but with Laken Tomlinson not being out there, it kind
Yeah.
of that's really one of the only reasons he's going to be starting, right? But so he's looked up and down as well. He's had some moments where he looks good and like he could turn into something, but much like we mentioned with some of the rookies, like as a first year starter, I kind of think of you as a rookie. So like Aaron Banks,
Yep.
like he's gonna make those rookie mistakes because he just doesn't have a lot of those snaps and a lot of that experience. So yeah, I mean Aaron Banks, I'm a little worried about. Spencer Burford, um he was the 5th round pick for the 49ers. And he's starting at right guard. But I would say that I think Burford, the team likes him. And I think there's a lot to like about Burford. So I'm not as worried about him. All right. So, but at the same time, he is a rookie, right? So you're always
Yeah.
susceptible to those rookie mistakes. And they're going to learn along the way. See, there's a comment here as well. Hasn't Mike McGlinchey been injured? That has also been a thing. So while McGlinchey, we know him as a staple of this offensive line, he's also somewhat of a question mark because last season he had the injury, and then in training camp he suffered a knee injury on that same leg. So not great, but he did practice all of this week, and he seems to be okay. So he might not be the same Mike McGlinchey that he was before, but still I would bank on him to be serviceable. I'm a little more worried about McGlinchey in the pass blocking than I would be run blocking. But I mean, yeah, altogether I'm a little worried, that I think it's going to take a few weeks for them to really gel and start looking good.
So because the Bears, I feel like I'm not a big fan of the Bears D tackles, but hearing that with the interior of the line too, the Bears at least have some veterans with Justin Jones who's looked a little bit better. So are you scared that this D line for the Bears, where you have a Travis Gibson who had I think like 8 sacks and like 9 games started or so, are you nervous about the pressure at all getting into his face because of this line.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the dress rehearsal preseason game versus the Texans, the offensive line looked terrible and Trey Lance couldn't do anything. So I fear that happening, right? Because like I mentioned in the pod right before this, a lot of Trey Lance and how he's going to look out there is dependent on how the offensive line looks, right? You have to at least
Yeah.
hold up a little bit. I mean, yeah,
Amen.
Trey Lance could escape the pocket, but at least give him some time to like look at his receiver and see who's out there, you know? So that's the concern that I have, that the floodgates are going to open right off the bat, like in the last preseason game. But at the same time, like I said, I think there's a lot of time between that final game and this week 1 to kind of work out those kinks. And I really do hope that, they can clean that up.
Nice. And we got a question from Freebird. I think that this is great. How do you think the rain will impact this game for the 49ers, I guess, on offense and then on defense?
Well, I think for the offense, they're going to want to run the football a lot. And like that was already kind of assumed, right? I think this was going to be a run heavy game plan for the 49ers, regardless of the weather. But now with the weather I saw, I think the last I saw it was like 80% chance of rain, right? And so if it really starts to pour, I mean, I still feel like it benefits the 49ers run game. I feel like it always benefits the run game, right? Because they're just it gets sloshy out there. And what I'm worried about though is the field. I mean, I'm scared about this field now. You just brought out all my like worst fears. And so like I just hope both teams have fun and no injuries take place, right? Like, cause it's week 1, that would be the worst thing, for either team.
Yeah, the city of Chicago is just terrible with it. Like there's this guy called the Sod Father that does the fields in Chicago, and it's amazing, but the city doesn't pay for that guy. And everyone's like, just get the Sod Father and you can finally have a good field. And the city's like, we're not paying for that. So it could be, because I know the 49ers have been affected with some injuries. So it's probably not great hearing some of that. But another great question from Renewable out here with Jimmy there. Do you think that there's a short leash on Trey Lance at all?
I don't. And honestly, it would be malpractice for the 49ers to have a short leash on Trey Lance, someone who you invested a lot of first round picks for. And I think bringing Jimmy Garoppolo back was more so because it fell on their lap. Like he was just there. He's already here. Like, let's just see if he'll take less money to stay. Like that's a win-win, situation in case like anything happens to Trey Lance. One, if he looks absolutely terrible, which, I don't think he will look that bad. And 2, if there are any injuries, because let's face it, this roster is built for a deep playoff run. But I think bringing Jimmy Garoppolo kind of gives you that insurance that even if Trey Lance goes down, like your season isn't in the tank, So I don't think there's necessarily a short leash on Trey Lance. I know there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, they're just going to give him these 2 games, see how he does. If he loses any of these first 2 games, they're going to put Jimmy Garoppolo back in there. No, I think at the end of the day, the ultimate goal should be to continue to want to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, that's the whole reason why they kept him around. So maybe we can try to trade him, in the season. If another quarterback gets hurt on, some other team, of course, he'd have to waive his trade clause. That's another story, situation. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think this is Trey Lance's team, and Jimmy is just there.
So how confident are you in Trey Lance? Because I know majority of Bears fans, myself included, it's like this is a spot where we can puff out our chest. And I think honestly, a lot of times we might be able to puff out our chest and say, we have the better quarterback. And I think we're all confident in saying our quarterbacks better. Do you feel that way, or should we put more respect on Trey Lance's name?
I definitely feel like coming out of the draft, like Justin Fields was ready to go. Like he was not as raw as Trey Lance is. He had the experience, and so he would have been a safer bet, in my opinion. Justin Fields would have been for the
Yeah.
49ers. Um, but I think the 49ers were really banking on longer term and higher ceiling. And, both of these quarterbacks could end up being, really good and maybe just as good at the end of the day. But, we still got to see more from Trey Lance to really know. I feel like we've all seen enough from Justin Fields that we could say, like, yeah, he's going to be really good.
Yeah.
We could safely say that. For Trey Lance, the jury's still out. We need to see more. So, I'm not really comfortable to say one way or another, you know, what was right and what was wrong about this decision, but I know fans, as 49er fans, like we are optimistic about Trey Lance. Most of us are, at least. And so we're really excited to see, what he could do, especially with Kyle Shanahan as the coach, right? And all the other weapons. The biggest thing for me is that Trey Lance is going into he's in a much better situation than a lot of the rookies or second year players or quarterbacks in this league, right? Like
Yeah.
there's not really any denying that. So he has that going for him. And all he has to do is just don't turn the ball over. Like don't screw it up. Like your job is pretty simple. Like at the very least, if he does exactly what Jimmy Garoppolo did as far as like his efficiency goes, I think
Yeah.
we would be happy for this first season. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And like it's a good point because the readiness, I think that's an amazing point right there because yeah, like I agree. Justin Fields seemed more ready. Trey Lance with his like what 12 starts or like 11 starts in college. And yeah, it just seemed more of that raw talent and then being able to groom him. But speaking of Justin Fields, let's switch over to this defense. So 49ers defense versus Justin Fields. I think they got to him 4 times last game. How are you feeling with this defense? I know that you guys lost a couple players on defense, and also Jimmy Ward is currently out. How confident are you in this defense going into Soldier Field?
Yeah, you mentioned probably the biggest concern going into the season for the defense is the safeties, right? Because I would feel good if Jimmy Ward was out there and Talanoa Hufanga was out there as well. But with Jimmy Ward out, obviously, like that's a huge spot to fill. And I think it's going to be George Odom who's going to be out there, which interesting enough, former Colt
Yeah.
safety. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, that's really the only question I have. But far from that, I feel like this defense is way better than last year, and that's scary. Like
Yeah.
I saw someone in the comments earlier say that the 49ers secondary is I forgot what word they used, but they're vulnerable. I think that's what they said. And like what I would say to that is yeah, the safeties maybe a little vulnerable. I will say that Talanoa Hufanga has looked good throughout training camp. He looks like he's taken a next step. So that's really good. Although I would say Hufanga is probably not that good in coverage. He still has some work to do in that department. So that's probably the only concern with Hufanga. And again, Jimmy Ward not being out there. So George Odom has to step up. That being said, the cornerback group is far and beyond improved from last season. We talked about this earlier. Week 8, it was Josh Norman out there for crying out loud. I mean, come on. Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Mosley actually had his worst game of the season against the Bears in that Week 8 game, actually. And credit to Darnell Mooney. I thought he played a really good game in that one. And I think he'll have his in this one as well. Although I will say the 49ers brought in a new corner in this game in Charvarius Ward, and he's looked amazing in camp. And he was really underrated actually as a free agent after
Yeah.
his season with the Chiefs. And so I feel like the 49ers really lucked out with that addition because I feel like he was kind of an unknown, right? Like a lot of fans didn't really know who he was when we heard that sign. We had to do some research, right? But no, we feel really good about Charvarius Ward. He's looked phenomenal throughout camp. And so I really feel like it's going to be a great matchup between, Ward and Mooney. And there's potential for Ward to shut Mooney down a little bit. And I know you guys in the comments might go crazy, might be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But and like I said, I think Mooney's gonna have his, just the fact that he's gonna get that volume. Like
Yeah.
he's the unquestioned wide receiver one on this team. But I feel good about the corners much more in this game than I did in the past. So that's gonna force Justin Fields, I think, to get the ball out quickly, because you also have this defensive line who's going to be coming after you. Nick Bosa, I mean, goes without saying just how good he is, and he's going to be going against the rookie left tackle. I know you guys feel good about him, but let's face it, it's Nick Bosa. So
Yeah, fair.
we feel pretty good about that.
Yeah.
And then we have Javon Kinlaw at nose tackle, who we had DJ Jones there last season. So some big shoes to fill there, but Javon Kinlaw looks incredible this season. His body, he's huge. So we feel good about Javon Kinlaw right now. The biggest question with Kinlaw is if he can stay healthy. It's week 1, so I hope he can, just stay healthy for week 1 at least, right? And Eric Armstead, rushing from the interior has been just a revelation for this defensive line. And so that's going to continue. And you got Samson Ebukam on the other side. We don't even mention the fact that the 49ers defensive line probably has the best depth out of any defensive line in the league, maybe. And they like to rotate their guys out, keep them fresh. And I think that's going to be really important in this game, because Justin Fields is going to have them running around at times. So they're going to be rotating a lot, I think.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that too, just with Drake Jackson, rookie out of USC, end of the second round type of selection. And I know that some people were really high on him. He's probably going to be in that rotation. How's he been looking so far?
He's looked really good. I think the best preseason game he had was against Minnesota, and he was just wrecking that line. We're really excited about him. To be able to have him in the second round is kind of like a complete steal, like for 49er fans. Like that's how we feel about him. So I don't know how many snaps he's going to get in this game. I still feel like there's other guys in this rotation who are going to be a little ahead of him, just because they have more experience, right? But we feel really great about Drake Jackson. So, hopefully he gets a chance to make a good play out there.
So real quick, Freebird asked, is Pringle going to play? Yes, all signs point to yes. But the big question that I'm thinking about is I could see Dante Pettis potentially getting some extra snaps since he has that chemistry already. And also the Dante Pettis revenge game out here with the 49ers. So we'll see who ends up playing, but I think it might be a solid rotation overall. But Steph, I'm curious too, how many sacks do you think this 49ers team might come away with? So 4 last time, putting you on the spot.
I think there's potential for 4 again. Like I definitely would say 4 is the, threshold. I think they'll get at least 4.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I agree with what J-Rock says out here. The Bears are probably going to be chipping, having the running backs, tight ends somewhere out there that can at least kind of take some of that pressure off for sure. But let's actually go back to the secondary too, because J-Rock asked another piece about Samuel Womack. Because those outside corners, Ward has been good when he was with KC, so probably going to kind of continue to be good with the 49ers. Mosley's been a good corner as well. But what can you tell me about this rookie Womack?
Well, he kind of surprised all of us. And I think the fact that he, got the starting job so quickly. There was Darquez Dennard, who he was competing with. He was with the 49ers last season as well. Not as a starter, but, I feel just with Dennard being a veteran, he kind of at first was the favorite to be the slot corner, but Samuel Womack has completely earned the trust of, this defense, and he completely earned this job. I mean, he got 2 interceptions in one game in the preseason. He had 1 pass breakup in the other. And even in camp, like, he's just looked incredible. He looked good in the joint practices against Minnesota as well. So he's someone who I feel very confident in right off the bat. And I wasn't expecting that, given the fact that, last season we had K'Wan Williams, a very underrated slot corner now with the Broncos. And so I'm really feeling right now that Samuel Womack could actually fill in his shoes pretty nicely. Like, it's not going to be 1-to-1, but I feel pretty confident. He looks very aggressive. He's very he he wasn't getting beat a lot. Like, he is able to stay with his man, which I think is really important, and just kind of like shadow his guys. At times he was like running routes for guys like that. So he's very sticky in coverage. And so I feel pretty good about it. One thing that, we mentioned earlier, we were talking about it, was, what if the Bears move Darnell Mooney to the slot, or some of their other guys to the slot, kind of go up against Samuel Womack? And I would definitely expect the Bears to test the rookie right out the gate. But we'll see what happens, right? Like, it's week 1. Like, we 49er fans don't know. We're just kind of running off the optimism of, training camp and the preseason, and kind of thinking that continues. But, we'll just have to wait and see how Samuel Womack looks in the regular season, week 1.
So if you are the Bears offensive coordinator, are you like, how would you attack this 49er defense? Is it really through that slot position? And you kind of mentioned the weakness at safety. Is that kind of the way that you would attack, or is there another weakness that we might not know about?
There's not many weaknesses. I'm trying not to be biased. Like, I'm like, I swear I'm not saying that like as a biased fan. Like, there really just aren't that many weaknesses on this defense. I mean, you can try to test out Javon Kinlaw. I mean, up the middle, running towards him, just to try to get away from, Nick Bosa. But like I said, I feel like Javon Kinlaw has looked good. But yeah, I would definitely look to seeing what the rookie has. I mean, even though Womack has looked good, like, as an offensive coordinator, you have to test out the rookies right off the bat. Just, give them a little heat check and, see how they're feeling, because a lot of cornerback play is about confidence, right? And some guys, if they miss on a play, like, it just kind of starts to spiral from there, right? So you definitely want to, test that right out the gate. And then definitely the safeties, the 49ers safeties, is a little bit of a question mark. And so I think it'd be smart to, test them as well.
And so also, we haven't even touched the running game. So, it sounds like way deep, little bit of difficulties, but up front, would you run against this defense, or would you more so just be like, hey, just test your luck passing? What are your feelings with the run game with David Montgomery?
What was interesting was, like, Khalil Herbert actually was running wild in that week 8 game in the first half against the Bears, and I mean against the 49ers defense. And I feel like his skill set kind of just gave the 49ers problems. Like, I feel like those kind of quick, agile, running backs kind of give them more of a headache than like David Montgomery. Montgomery's a great running back. But I almost feel like it's easier for the 49ers defense, for whatever reason, to, stop, guys like him, more so than like the, quick guys like Herbert. So I don't know. I mean, I wonder, do you think that they'll try to mix in some Herbert in there as well?
So the rumors are that that this might be a running back by committee. There's rumors out there saying that the Bears aren't fans of Montgomery. It's been reported by semi-reliable sources, but not like you know how it is. Like it comes out from one source, but you want it to hear it from multiple insiders. But it's just one
Yeah.
source saying maybe they don't like him as much in the system, so Herbert might get more carries. But Montgomery looks like the better back this entire preseason.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that's where, for me, I love Khalil Herbert, but I'd rather just say, since you have Montgomery, use the man and
Yeah.
use the people out there, have them play. But one other question that I have for you before we get into some of some of the just overall game predictions, are there any low key people on this 49ers team that we haven't covered today that you're like, watch out for this person, just a under the radar type of guy?
I feel like we've kind of gone over everyone. I would have said Samuel Womack, but I feel like we've covered him pretty well. I would mention some of the rotational defensive linemen. Charles Omenihu, I think he's going to get some run, and he's pretty dangerous as well. Very good pass rusher. Yeah, I mean, there's the 49ers depth is pretty good at the defensive line, so I think all of those guys who are going to get some snaps, just because you don't see Nick Bosa out there doesn't mean they're not going to get some pass rush, right? So I think the biggest thing though with this game is not about so much the pass rush, it's about containing Justin Fields and keeping him in the pocket, right? You don't want to keep those open
Yep.
lanes, so I think that's the challenge for this team. I'll also say Aziz Al-Shaair. I mean, I feel
Yeah,
like
honestly, yeah.
Aziz, played well enough last season that people who were paying attention, probably, took notice, right? But a lot of people maybe don't know how good he is, but he's really solid playing next to Fred Warner. And so all the attention goes to Fred Warner, but Aziz is really good as well.
So I lied. One more question before we get into that. I was also a Danny Gray fan. Skokes talks about this too. Like I liked him. And are we going to see any Danny Gray, the wide receiver, out of SMU, come Sunday?
I hope so. Not to copy the meme, but I hope so. I mean, I definitely think when he's out there, it just adds an extra threat, and being able to take the top off the defense. He's very quick. There was in the joint practices against the Minnesota Vikings, he absolutely burned Patrick Peterson, which you could say Patrick Peterson is probably like on the last few years of his career, but
Yeah,
I mean, that was impressive. He just flew right by him, and that's just like the speed that he has. And he had some big plays in the preseason as well. Seems to have a good chemistry with Trey Lance. So yeah, I mean, I think there is a potential for him to have a couple snaps and just let him go deep and see what happens.
yeah. It'll be interesting. And like when he got that catch, I couldn't help but like be happy. He was one of the draft crushes of mine where I was kind of hoping that they were going to pick him up later on in the draft. And so it's nice seeing that. And I also I don't know if you're seeing some of the chat. I think that some people from your show must have popped in with some of the with some comments on the 49ers. But let's wrap things up with just the overall game predictions. For those that listened to the previous show, I already went through my game predictions where I think Bears win 20-17 because they're going to be coming out with some fire. But Steph, from the 49ers standpoint, how are you feeling about this game?
I feel pretty good. The 49ers have the better roster on paper, and I always say anything can happen any given Sunday, right? But And the Bears could very well be a good team. I definitely think they're a better team than they were last season. And so, honestly, I think a lot of the talk of, the Bears being trash and things like that is largely overblown by people who, haven't been paying attention to all the changes that they've made since last season. So I'll start off by saying that. I'll give you guys the compliments first. But ultimately, I feel like the 49ers win this game. And I think it's going to be one off of the defense's back. I mean, and that's really the whole point of the defense and all the emphasis they put on the defensive line this year, improving their cornerbacks. They really wanted their defense to be the insurance policy for any game that, if Trey Lance doesn't play his best game, this defense is still going to keep the 49ers in the game no matter what. So I think Trey Lance's performance may be shaky. I don't know. I think it's going to be a run-heavy pass game for the 49ers regardless. And I think, like I said, the defense are going to keep them in it. I think the 49ers win 23-17.
Okay. Yeah, covering the spread at least for the Bears. So all the bettors out there, we had a betting show before this with Mikey Betts, and we both said we like the spread. So that's good at least. But honestly, it's nice to hear the other side of the story, understanding where you guys are coming from. And yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. Like I was saying, I still expect the Bears to win, but it should be a great, incredible game. So Steph, thanks again for hopping on. We did back-to-back shows. We might just have to drink a whole bunch of water. Yeah, I saw the big jug. You might just have to drink that, and I gotta fill up too. But Steph, before I let you go, can you let everybody know how to follow you out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, I am on Twitter at 49K, and you guys can also follow me on YouTube. As Brad mentioned, we just did a live right before this one, so you guys could check that one out at my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Steph49K. Thanks for having me on, Brad. This was a blast.
Yeah, thanks. This was incredible. It's going to be a great game, and I can't wait. I hope that the Bears ultimately come away with it. It'll be cool to see these two quarterbacks. Hopefully it doesn't turn into a huge giant rivalry, and we can just kind of appreciate both of these, because you guys do always whoop up on the Packers. So hopefully if you play them again in the playoffs, you guys kick their ass. So best of luck this season, and Unbearable Sports Podcast, we're out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.
Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.